Especially when you're young or just starting out, there's no shortage of opinions. One person tells you one way, one person tells you another way, and you try to do as you're told until that purpose starts to show up and you realize I need to go. And that's what this show is all about. Stepping out on your own. We're going to talk to Katie Navarra-Bradley next. The heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people like you and me, just regular folks trying to make a difference in the world, but doing it on purpose. And sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes the storms rise. Sometimes the pressures become so strong that we wonder whether we can kind of keep it up and stick to our purpose. And that's what this is all about. Do we or don't we? And so we're going to find out with our guest, Katie Navarra-Bradley, next. So before we get to talk with her, I want to encourage you to like the show physically, like actually push the button that says this is a pretty good show. Hit that like button, follow us, subscribe if you don't mind. It makes me feel good, but it also tells friends and people in your network that this is a show worth listening to. Maybe some inspiring moments, opportunities to be motivated to take that next step when things do get tough. And so if you'll do that, makes everything better, makes the world better, and life is good. So thanks for those efforts. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations. They're also in Jacksonville, Florida. They provide sales training and business growth strategies to help your business grow. And I like to say they do it on purpose. That's why they're partners with this show. They're doing it right. They're doing it well. They don't take shortcuts. They don't try to figure out the fastest way to close a sale. They try to build relationships. They try to build win-win situations. They try to encourage your salespeople. Sometimes this is going to sound terrible, but to say no when that's the right decision. I mean, these are things that are going to make a really strong business acumen and a culture for what you're trying to build. So go ahead and do it. Reach out to them and see what they have to say. It might be the best call you make on the day. You can check them out online at therubygroup.sandler.com. And I mentioned earlier, my guest today is Katie Navarra-Bradley. She's a content development specialist and owner of the business Katie Navarro Creative Services. She's also a professional leadership development coach and owns Katie the Coach, which uses horses to help build leadership potential. And the thing I like about Katie is that she is stepping out of her comfort zone and making things happen on her own. And that's kind of what the show is all about. So welcome, Katie Navarra-Bradley, to Purpose Under Pressure.
Thank you, Bryan. I'm excited to be here with you today.
I'm really glad you are too. We got to know each other through a podcast that you're now doing with Jenny Talego. It's called Leading with Instinct, and it talks about things that horses are doing to help, that they already do that we can learn from as far as leadership goes. But you've also created this business on your own, and like many of our listeners and viewers out there, they're wondering, can I do it? Can I do it on my own? Can I get it done? And so I'm really excited to have that conversation. So tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what makes you tick, what drives you, what's good in your world that we can kind of start from as a foundation.
Sure, I'd love to share a little bit about my background. So, as you
Yeah.
alluded to, I am very involved in the horse industry. I'll tell you a little bit about that background because it'll help us get to the point where we are today. So, grew up as one of those horse crazy kids in Western New York. Also had English teachers who recognized an early talent for writing. And in high school, one of them said to me, "Did you realize that you could write for all of these horse magazines that you get in the mail and read every month?" And it was a light bulb moment for me because no, I never thought about actually writing for those magazines. And so from there, I joined an association called American Horse Publications, served on their board for 10 plus years, and started to build a freelance writing business exclusively in the horse industry, writing for all of the industry's biggest magazines. And we'll get to this later, but my first job out of high school at 22, I couldn't find a job in my career field with that communications title. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to work for a division of John Deere that no longer exists, by the way, but we were selling landscape supplies, irrigation sprinkler heads, grass seed, fertilizer.
Yeah.
I was building a distributorship location for them at 22 years old and building this freelance business. And my boss at the time said, "If I could get you to talk about irrigation the way you talk about horses and riding, you'll be an unstoppable salesperson." Well, that didn't quite happen. My career went in a lot of different directions, but that was the start of building this business that I now run today.
That was the beginning. So the beginning happened when a teacher stepped in, and I love that. I love when
Mhm.
teachers step up and take ownership of their pupils and the people that look up to them. That happened to me. That Mr. Shaner said, "Brian, what are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I don't know." he said, "Well, you got a decent voice. Why don't you go do the announcements and then see if you can turn that into something?" And that's it's that spark that teachers don't always realize, and they take advantage. You remember that clearly. That person took an interest in your life.
Well, and I was really lucky at that time. They kept changing the English curriculum in our school. So I had her in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. And she also was in the horse
Wow.
industry and her daughters competed. So we shared an interest in that piece. And yes, to your point, I was very fortunate that she created that spark because I don't know that I ever would have put two and two together on my own.
That's what teachers are all about. They don't, and I don't mean this badly. I think teachers. I spent a few years on the school board, and I know a little bit about this. I think teachers get caught up in the pressures of the day and the curriculum and the grading scales and did Johnny bring his lunch today? And like they miss those impacts, and maybe don't even realize that they either had made an impact or missed an opportunity. And so good for you and good for that teacher. Now I want to talk then a little bit. I'm really interested in the person that worked for John Deere. He said, "I'm going to make you a great salesperson." But you didn't
Right.
want to be a great salesperson, right?
Right. So part of the way that I got that position is that my father worked for the company at the same time in Western New York.
Yeah.
And when they opened this location in my area, they were struggling to get it off the ground. And so I was kind of just to come out and help them straighten out their inventory and get things lined up so that they could bring in somebody else after I was there and they were to run the branch. And I was there 3.5 years before I moved into a regional role with them. But the joke with my dad was always, I don't want to be a salesperson. I don't want to be that person that's selling used cars or all of the things that we think of when we hear the word salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized, what I really came to understand through that role is it's about relationships.
Yes.
I didn't necessarily have all the technical expertise, even though through my father I had been involved in the industry. But what I did know was, to be honest, I don't know the answer to this. Let me find out and give you a call back. And if it took longer than I expected, calling the contractor back and saying, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm still working on the solution to your problem. And so in the 3 years that I managed that branch, we went from 98,000 to 1.1 million. And we brought the actual operating margin from like negative $75,000 to plus 25.
Wow.
So it was this understanding of relationship building, which of course, as we get into later, follows you into an office job, building a business of your own, and all of the parts that come along with that.
And so let's talk about that because you had success and you're doing great. And I'm an old salesperson myself. I get it. When salespeople, there's not a bad word unless you're doing it badly. And you were having success. You were kind of working a little bit in the family, a little bit. You're doing things well. It's not what you wanted to do, but you were doing well. What happened next? How did you not get? Because sometimes we find ourselves in a spot and we just kind of grow there. We put in some roots, and pretty soon, 30 years later, you look back and say, "What happened?" That didn't happen with you. So what happened next after you got some success, but realized that maybe you weren't on purpose?
So when I was in college, I also had an internship at our communications office and really felt drawn to work in a higher ed communications office, telling the story of alumni and teacher programs and professor work. And so to move up within the John Deere Landscapes ecosystem into more of a marketing role, I would have had to have moved either to Georgia or to Michigan. And so I wasn't prepared to leave New York and make that kind of jump. And so I started looking for positions outside the company for that reason alone. They
Mm-hmm.
had promoted me to a regional role. I was working with two regional vice presidents, one in the Mid Atlantic and one in Texas. But I had this opportunity to take on, they called it the director of institutional advancement at a adult VOTEC school, or we helped individuals who hadn't earned their GED yet get their GED, hopefully get them into a college prep program at a local community college. We also had trade programs like welding and cosmetology. And so I was running is a very small shop. It was myself and 1.5 times of a recruiter, but in charge of everything from grants to marketing to recruitment and anything that contributed to raising the visibility of that institution. Wasn't quite a college, but it was very close to that educational setting. And I got to work very closely with the community college that administered the funding of this through the state. And so then from there, I parlayed that into a statewide association that was also in the education field and just kept moving into these marketing positions because I knew that's eventually where I wanted to end up with my business. And I was looking for opportunities to really gain the expertise and the knowledge so that I could operate a business successfully on my own.
Yeah. And so then how did you end up, because now you do own and operate a successful business, and how did that transpire? That's not easy.
So this goes perfectly to your purpose under pressure.
Yeah, good.
And, I had been freelancing since the time I had that job at John Deere, and I had built that freelance business to the equivalent of my full-time salary. And I kind of am this person
like a side hustle kind of thing going on.
Yeah, a side hustle.
Yeah.
A side hustle that was equivalent to my full-time job. So I was exhausted. Every spare minute of time off, that's where it went to. And though I had that great boss way back when, one of the things he said stuck in my mind, and that was, you always need to have 3 years worth of salary saved to launch your own business. And so that's what I was always striving for. I need 3 years of salary in the bank before I can leave. Well, every job I got, that meant making more money, which meant you needed more in the bank, right?
Yeah.
And it got to the point, I didn't get to 3 years. I got to about 2. And it was just like starting to take a toll on my health. I was constantly working around the clock, full time, after hours. Like I said, all vacation time was dedicated to working. But really, the true defining moment for me was in my last position. One of my responsibilities was creating this program book for our annual convention. And it fell at the same time every year. And it was always right around my birthday and my anniversary. And the individuals I had to collaborate with on the project had very different work styles. Their work style was to wait. They felt they worked better under pressure, but then when changes had to be made, it stressed them out. And so after doing that for 5 years, the 5th year, this individual came in and just ripped me up one side and down the other about changes that they had gone in and made that were unauthorized. And so when I said, you can't make those, it was this firecracker of, you don't know how to do your job. You've been here 5 years, all of these things. I was upset to the point that my husband thought my parents had been in an accident driving out to our house that day.
Yeah.
And so, and it shouldn't be that way. And so I went home, told the organization that I might not be back on Monday. And me being stubborn, knew that our year-end bonuses were not far away in December. And so went back to work, stuck it out to December and said, this is the time for me to create my own vision. I was feeling the pressure at work, and it was changing who I was as a person into something that I didn't like. And so it was time for me to say, this is the moment to take that risk and step out. And so I did. I put in my resignation, gave them 3 weeks notice, went home in 2020. And then a week later we had the pandemic. So
man, that happens in every episode of this show. There's always a moment where it was going good and then the pandemic came. Yeah.
But what I will say is, I expected that once I left, my income would double. It didn't double, but given the fact that we were in a worldwide pandemic, it still exceeded any expectations that people, I think, had for new businesses that year, and has just snowballed from there.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You were forced through pressure to take the step and do it, even though a well-respected boss had given you the advice, look, you're not ready yet. Yeah. Well-meaning, didn't want to see you starve or give up your dream because it didn't work. And yet the pressure said, no, I got to go now. So how did you navigate that conversation in your head? I know it's not the right time, but it is the right time. How were you able to choose one or the other?
So I think it came down to two things. I had joined an organization called American Society for Journalists and Authors in 2019. I went to their conference in April of 2019 and actually met all of these people doing what I wanted to do, making sustainable living. And
Ah,
so that for me was a light bulb moment because
oh,
everybody
wait, this
always
can
kept
work.
saying, right, this
Yeah.
can work.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I had to expand well outside the horse industry. So we can talk about different clients that I work with. So it wasn't possible to just write for horse people. So I
Hmm.
had to realize that my business model needed to change a little bit.
Hmm.
So I went to that conference in April. I went back to another conference they had in November or December of that year. And I thought, okay, this was the permission I needed to do that. Among this particular episode at work, unfortunately, at the same time, I also had some health struggles. Fortunately, nothing severe, but enough that I actually ended up having mono. I could not get out of bed in the
Hmm.
morning because I was just so stressed out about what had been going on. And I thought to myself, I need a break. So I got some sick leave that I was able to use. And before I left for that sick leave, they said to me, when you come back and you have to pick up this project again, we're going to allow you to work with an outside contractor on this project. So I thought, great, I can do that. I can stay in this job because I still need 5 more years to be vested in all these things, right? So I
Yeah.
go home, I rest up, I feel really great. I come back. The first day I come back, they say, no, we can't work with this as an outside contractor. And in that moment, there was no more deciding. It
You're done.
was, I'm done because I knew that I couldn't sustain that anymore.
Yep.
The other piece is some of the good friends I've developed who have become freelancers have been forced to. They have had to care for a parent. They've lost their jobs. And so I felt that I was fortunate enough to be the one in control of driving that decision. And that after 15 years of working toward it, it was going to be a now or never point.
Yeah. So what do you think it would have taken for you to realize that you had that control within you all along, and that it didn't require someone to be in your face, and it didn't require someone to break kind of a promise and how the working relationship was going to be, that you could make that decision? Because there's a lot of people listening right now. I did that with my company. I had to wait until things had hit this little lever. I could have done
Mm-hmm.
it anytime I wanted to, and yet I
Right.
didn't realize it. What Why do you think that is? Why do you need to be pushed out of that nest as a young entrepreneur?
Well, I think we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Can we make it? What, to your point, are we going to starve?
Yeah.
We also have to look at the situation that we're in financially. I was fortunate enough to have been at a point where I was able to save and bank up enough that I wasn't going to worry about it. But I really think the true game changer for me was joining ASJA and going to that conference and seeing other people doing what I wanted to do, because they were modeling all of this risk that I had just been swirling along in my head on my own.
Hmm.
And I have carried that forward. And now I am in the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a business accelerator. And
Good.
it's the same thing. Like, my
Yeah.
business has reached this point of I need to decide what's next.
Hmm.
If I was doing that alone, it would be, oh, this risk is too big, or this is too
Yeah.
scary, or just not having the resources to do it on your own. So I feel like for me, and maybe for our listeners, to find a group of growth minded individuals within what you're trying to do, and then also with people who are in very different industries that you can learn different things from, that to me has been what pushed me to make those decisions.
Give you that confidence. And so now you've got this business that's doing extremely well. You've also got Katie the coach, and you've got the equine leadership development and things. Is that now a side hustle into something else, or is that you just believing in yourself, saying, I want to do all kinds of things? Like, where does that fit in what you're trying to build?
So Katie, the coach, came out of making this daring change of having my own company. I have been interested in leadership development for as far back as when I was in college. I was part of our college's leadership development program that actually became a model for other colleges nationwide. And then throughout different careers that I had, I participated in chamber leadership academies, association management leadership academies, but really didn't know what to do with it other than the fact that I just loved reading about leadership, developing skills in leadership. And so when I created Katie Navarra Creative Services and went out on my own, it now opened up all of this time to explore another passion. And so during that time, I went and became a certified executive coach through the International Coaching Federation. Again, another light bulb moment. They asked us, well, what do you want to specialize in when you coach? And all of a sudden I was like, people are doing coaching with horses. Don't know why I didn't think about that when I went into it. But it kind of came out through that training program. And so right now it is a very small portion of the business that I run, but I do work with some very large manufacturers, some state agencies to deliver leadership development programs and by using natural horse behavior. So we bring them into the arena. We ask them to run through some exercises and some different interactions with the horses. And we talk about what's happening right there in the moment and then how that translates back to the workplace.
And you love doing it.
I love doing it.
You love doing it. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned, your creative services, there's lots of people and there's freelance industries and there's people in other countries and there's just a ton. There's a dearth of content developers and people to help you with social media and blogs. And there's all kinds of competition. And so there are people out there that will say, I can't do that. There's already somebody doing that. And you mentioned someone's doing equine leadership development that's already an industry, and holy cow. And yet you step in anyway. What's the thought behind setting into trying to build something where, others will say it's already been built?
Everyone in the organization needs to know how to sell. Sales is the strength of any company. Whether or not you're in marketing, operations, or even finance, everyone has a strong shared accountability towards driving top-line revenue. Whether or not you're client-facing or talking over the phone, you're able to build a stronger level of rapport with the clients. Everyone in the organization shares that responsibility to know how to sell.
What's the thought behind setting into trying to build something where, others will say it's already been built?
That's a great question.
It's a loaded question too, because I'm looking for an answer.
I'm not sure I'm going to give you the answer you want to hear.
Good.
Because for me, I think it's been an innate characteristic. For whatever reason, and I don't really know where it came from, have always been the one that's just tried something. Mm-hmm. When I mentioned that John Deere position, I was 22 and I was, if not the only, one of the only women managing a store at the time. And I never just went into the job and did it. And then when I started applying for other positions, even though the job qualifications were probably most likely well above where I was at my career, I applied for them anyways. There's a study that says, men will apply for jobs even if they have 2 qualifications, and women will only apply if they have all of them. Okay. For whatever reason, I had this innate characteristic that I just threw it out there. What's the worst they can say to me?
Throw your hat in the ring.
Thank you. Yeah. And so that has just carried through with everything that I've done. And, it's interesting you say this. I had a call with a potential client this morning in the HR industry. There are a ton of writers in the HR industry. Yeah. And you know what she said to me? We don't actually have a stable of freelancers. I have one guy and he's probably close to retirement age. So if you don't reach out and take that chance, you don't know it exists.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking that you would say, is that there's like this surplus. There's plenty for everyone in any industry, and we see the biggies, and we see the ads or whatever. We see the major winners in any industry, and we think, they've gobbled everything up. They have in every industry, unless you're Apple or something. I mean, they've got a very small percentage of the market, and we don't need as new entrepreneurs, as small business owners. we don't need everyone. We need a
Right.
few good clients that feel the same way about business as we do. Isn't that right? And there's plenty. And so step into those markets. There's one business lesson I learned a long time ago is that, and forgive me if I'm using the names improperly, but Burger King and Wendy's will open up where McDonald's already is. You've already got the number one fast food franchise in the world serving everyone already. How could there possibly be enough for? No, there's plenty. People like doing business where business is being done. So congratulations. I'm interested then, what does the future look like? You've got the leadership development, Katie the coach gig. You've got Katie Navarro creative services going on. And yet we're in these crazy times in business right now. What does the future look like? And what pressures are you going to have to navigate and overcome to kind of continue to make your dreams come true?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'd like to back up for 1 second to
We'll hold that one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll hold that for a second. I love your analogy of the restaurants because for me, I'm a Wendy's person because I like salads. Burger King, McDonald's don't offer
Not the same.
salads.
That's right.
And they're not the same. And so when you think about that in terms of a business, it's understanding what makes you unique and being authentic. And yes, you may offer similar services to somebody else, and maybe they've even had a full-time position in that industry and your expertise is writing about it. You just don't know what's going to click with the client that is hiring you. And so being authentic, leaning into what you can bring. And sometimes they actually really appreciate having an quote unquote outsider who doesn't know the industry, because then you can see things in a fresh way that they may have missed.
Yeah. I like that. It's like betting on yourself. Like there's got to be something here that I want to do. I think it's also harder to, if you were the first person creating equine leadership development, people would be like, what? What is that? And at least you have that path. Like, yeah, we're doing this too, but we're doing it differently. And I think that's a real differentiator to help you kind of bring your business. So if the people listening and watching right now wondering, is there space for me? What we're trying to say is absolutely take that step and go do it. So yeah, so getting back to, I do like to know what's next, because I think to overcome pressure, we have to anticipate them. So as you continue to grow in your business, what are the things that you're going to have to overcome? And maybe our listeners will as well, as they try to kind of build their own thing.
We were talking about this a little bit before we hit record. This business has been wildly successful beyond what I expected, what I set out at 22 and said, I want to build a freelance business. And since going out on my own, I mean, just the revenue that it has generated has surpassed anything that I thought I would be at. And it's phenomenal. It also brings new challenges. How do I handle all of this myself? Is this the model that's going to serve me until retirement? And so I'm, playing around with some different things, still actively prospecting and looking for new clients within the sphere of what I do and what I do well, but figuring out what is maybe next in that. So what's an example of that? So working potentially with individuals who want help writing a book. I helped a professor from Cornell University. We co-authored a book called Shoeing the Modern Horse that we had published 2 years ago. And many other people say, we don't know how to write a book. We want to write a book. So that is something that I'm working on with folks who have reached out to me with some interest. The other is really finding a way to bring together the equine facilitation with the writing piece. And I know that sounds like two very abstract opposite things, but working on looking at potentially some events that might be able to unite those two in a very unique and different way. Again, that differentiator. There's a lot of places you can go out to a writing retreat and write your book. There's a lot of places you can go and have an experience with the horses. And so I'm trying to find a way that unites my talents in a unique way, that offers something that others may not have the ability to do so.
And that might dovetail into my final question here. And I'm thinking back to my days in high school when that teacher, Mr. Shaner, said, go be a radio guy. Today, he might not, if he were still living, he might not say, go be a radio guy. The world's changed. I don't know that there's a lot of long-term career opportunities for a lot of people in radio anymore. It's a side subject, but it brings me to my question. In content development and in leadership development and in knowledge in general, there are some that will say that your job is being replaced by AI, and that anybody that wants anything written, you can write a book. I could get on to write me a book, and away it'll go. And it's pretty amazing, and it's going to get better. And so what do you say to those who are afraid? I'm not afraid. I'm embracing it. But what would you say to those who are afraid, or what is your approach to coexisting with AI?
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Bryan. I don't describe myself as an early adopter of technology at all. But when I saw ChatGPT come out in 2020, I knew I needed to learn about this or I was going to be obsolete, and have written a lot about it. Definitely not a coder or a tech expert in any means, but have written about it in a number of industries and the applications that it potentially holds for those. This week, I'm starting an AI boot camp for writers.
Oh, good.
That is going to walk through the next level of, how do we leverage these tools to increase efficiencies? So that doesn't, in my opinion, that does not mean write for me. That means be my brainstorming partner. Help me with SEO keywords. Help me condense or highlight the top 10 points in a 2-hour transcript so that I can review the highlights, see if I need to go back to certain timestamps. How can I remove the timestamps from a transcript without having to go through and spend 45 minutes removing all of those things? So I believe that we need to embrace AI in a way that makes sense for our businesses. Absolutely. I've heard people who run content agencies tell me that they have their staff use AI to write blogs that are regurgitating the same thing that they write for every client, because they feel that frees them up to write the more creative things. The things that I've seen with AI it sounds very similar to everything else that's been published. So if you really want to create and have your voice be out there, you still need to do the work yourself. And I think certainly there are content buyers who are just looking at the bottom line dollar, and they are using AI to do that.
Sure.
But the ones who really want to differentiate themselves, want to retain their unique voice, they're still having it actually written, whether it's in-house or with a freelancer that they hire.
Yeah, which goes right into what we were saying earlier about there will always be room for one more opinion or approach or perspective or viewpoint that is very human, and someone will pay for that and help your business kind of grow. So thank you for sharing that. I when it comes to AI and me, I feel like, because again, I look from the education point of view, I think about a teacher now who's going to try to teach me. I remember when I was in school, like every year we learned that Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. I still don't know what a cotton gin is, but I still remember that Eli Whitney did it.
Right.
You don't need to do that anymore, because I've got a phone in my hand that if I want to know about Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, I can know everything I possibly can know about it. It's all there. I think the future of business and creative content development and education and everything is not about what we know, but what do we want to know? Like, the world is open now, wide open. How can I learn to ask the right questions? How can I learn to understand my audience enough that I can give to them the way for them to ask the right questions? And I think that's an opportunity that we didn't have before AI, where we only knew what we knew. And now we know everything we don't know.
Right. We still have to be careful, right? And make sure it's not hallucinating or giving false data or, plagiarizing. But you're absolutely right. And then the flip side of that is, by also leaning into the passion of working with horses, I also see that we are getting to a point where technology is isolating. We also have a generation of youth who interact with their technology more than they interact with their peers or adults. And so we're losing communication skills. People are craving time away from their screens. People will say, oh, book publishing isn't worth it anymore. Kids don't read. Well, there are studies out there that show high school students, college students actually want the hard copy of what they're reading because they spend so much time on their tablets.
Yep.
But beyond that, I see being able to create experiences with the horses, give people a chance to connect with one another, connect with a being that is, living, breathing beyond that technology. So finding ways that we can live with it, but also finding ways to still create that authentic way of being a part of what it is to be human.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and not lose that humanity. We cannot lose the humanity. I still say thank you. So when I use ChatGPT or Siri or whoever, everyone laughs at me, but I say thank you, and now Siri will say you're very welcome or no problem or don't give it another thought and they say, why do you do that? On ChatGPT, I'll type in, thank you. That was great work. But I feel like if someday they're really going to be in charge, if AI is really going to be running the place, I better be on good terms with them. Is the way I'm kind of looking. But I think the idea is you don't want to lose your humanity. When someone does something nice for me, I say thank you. If I need something, I say please. I think that's the human way to be. That's the way I was brought up. And so whether that's a machine or not, shouldn't change that. It's the way I'm going at it anyway. What advice as we close would you give to someone out there who's thinking about making the same jumps that you made? I really want them to hear from you. If they're maybe not stuck, but they're not doing maybe what's on purpose for them. They don't know if they want to leave. They don't know what, but they know this isn't it, because there's a lot of folks in that boat. What do you say to them?
I think I have two pieces of advice for that. So the first, I said earlier, find a group that motivates you and pushes you beyond where you are. That, to me, having membership in those groups, of seeing people doing what I aspired to do but was too afraid at the moment, really helped me get past that stuck moment and say, I can do this. And other people are succeeding at it in their own way. And there is room for me, even though there are 450 people, 450 writers, there was still plenty of room for me to find my own way in the industry as well. So that's number one. And then my other piece of advice, this is harder because we all have our internal barometers, but I would encourage people to trust their gut. If their gut is really telling them now is the time, do it now. We all take for granted our health and that we have tomorrow and that we have this endless future ahead of us. We really don't know what awaits us around the next corner. And so I feel fortunate that my health issues that pushed me to this were very minor and things that self-corrected within 3 months of launching my own business. But take that chance before it's too late.
Thank you, Katie. That's amazing. If you wanted to ask people to reach out to them, first of all, what kinds of services are you providing through Katie Navarro Creative Services, and what kind of people are we looking for to help with Katie the Coach, and how would people reach out to you and get involved with those things?
Sure. So through Katie Navarra Creative Services, I work with mid-sized to larger size companies who are looking for things like blogs, thought leadership posts, webinar scripts. I'm working on annual reports for a few clients. So smaller or mid to larger brands, associations, individuals who want help getting started on writing their book. That's really, the area that I specialize in that space. They can go to my website, katienavarra.com. There's a contact form there. They fill that out and it will come directly to me. On the Katie the Coach side, looking for leaders who are looking for unique ways to develop their staff, build team culture, really something that's transformative that sticks with them outside of some of the traditional delivery methods that we have for training. I've worked with manufacturers, leadership academies, internal leadership teams of pretty much any kind of organization you can think of. And that website too, katiethecoach.com, also has a contact form attached to it.
And then give a quick plug for your podcast, Leading with Instinct.
So that is my newest adventure with my good friend, Ginny Talego. And Ginny is a phenomenal equine facilitator as well. And we have joined forces to talk about this work with the horses and how instinctual herd behavior has helped horses survive and adapt to change, like we're all going through. And we talk about how their behavior can help us level up our own skills and be the leaders, business owners that we want to be.
Awesome. It's a good show. I've heard it, and it's how we kind of got together. And I appreciate that you're out there making an impact. We talked about starting something new, and it's already been done. There's a few huge podcasts, and then there's all the rest. As long as you're stepping in and making that impact and trying to impact one person at a time, I think you've accomplished a lot, and maybe even a lot more than others. And so, congratulations, and thank you for being a part of our show, Katie Navarra-Bradley. I really do appreciate your sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You know, folks, this show isn't just made for businesses that have made it, because I tell you what, pressure happens at every single level. I don't care if you're the big CEO, VP, you've done it all. You wake up in the morning and pressure hits you in the face, and you have to deal with things in a really strong and important and impactful way. And if you're just starting your own thing, it's the same. We are just people. We put our pants on the same, one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And we go to work and we get it done. And that's what I love about this show. Whether you're starting something new, whether you've already done it, you're trying to get over what's next. And the best advice I can give is to do the next right thing. And I think that's what Katie is doing as well. So thank you to Katie Navarra-Bradley. She's with Katie Navarra Creative Services and with Katie the Coach. And I hope you'll look them both up online and reach out to her. She's my guest on Purpose Under Pressure, brought to you by Sandler, by the Ruby Group. Sellers under pressure to perform, perhaps now more than ever. And Sandler does help you to succeed on purpose. You're going to find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at bryanmediastrategies.com/podcast. And wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week, and we will see you next time on Purpose.